an economy-class ticket from Atlanta to London. For 16-year-old Jordan Washington, it was a ticket to his future, a chance to audition for the Royal Academy of Music. But for the man in seat 24B, it was a problem he wasn't afraid to voice loudly and crudely for the entire cabin to hear. He blocked the aisle, his face a mask of contempt, refusing to let the black teenager take his assigned seat. What he didn't count on was that on this transatlantic flight, he wasn't just confronting a boy, he was confronting the collective conscience of 200 strangers. And they were about to deliver a verdict at 35,000 feet. The air in Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport was a thick, humid cocktail of jet fuel Cinnabon and human anxiety. It was a symphony of rolling suitcases, garbled announcements, and the frantic staccato of 1,000 different conversations. For Jordan Washington, it was the sound of possibility. At 16, he stood on the precipice of his life, a cello case clutched in one hand and a boarding pass to London Heathrow in the other. The paper felt flimsy, almost comically insignificant, for something that held the entire weight of his future. He was a tall, lanky kid, all elbows and knees, with a quiet intensity in his dark eyes that made him seem older than his years. His headphones were a permanent fixture, piping the intricate melodies of Bach's cello suites directly into his soul, a protective barrier against the chaos of the world. This flight wasn't a vacation. It was an audition. A single high-stakes performance for a scholarship at the Royal Academy of Music, the culmination of a decade spent coaxing beauty from 4 strings and a block of wood. He was flying solo, a rite of passage his parents had agreed to, with a mixture of pride and nail-biting terror. Jordan checked his pass for the 10th time. Flight BA226, Gate E14, Seat 24A. Window. He'd specifically chosen it, hoping to watch the patchwork of America shrink and dissolve into the vast blue expanse of the Atlantic, a visual metaphor for his own journey. As Zone 4 was called, he shuffled into the queue, his heart a frantic drum solo against his ribs. The line snaked slowly forward, a cross-section of humanity returning home, starting adventures, or like him chasing a dream. Ahead of him, a man in a crisp, slightly too tight business suit grumbled into his phone, his voice a low, gravelly complaint about market fluctuations and incompetent subordinates. He was perhaps in his late 50s, with a florid complexion that suggested a life of rich meals and short tempers. A gold watch gleamed on his wrist, and his leather briefcase looked expensive enough to have its own passport. "No, Philip. I don't care what the projections say," the man barked, oblivious to the people around him. "Just get it done. I'm about to be stuck in a metal tube with the great unwashed for 8 hours. The last thing I need is your whining." He snapped his phone shut and turned his gaze, sweeping over Jordan with an almost imperceptible sneer. It was a look Jordan knew well, a quick, dismissive appraisal that took in his hoodie, his worn jeans, and the color of his skin, and filed him away under a category he'd long since learned to ignore. The man, radiating an aura of self-importance, clutched his own boarding pass. Jordan caught a glimpse of it. Seat 24B. A knot of unease tightened in Jordan's stomach. 7, maybe 8 hours. Next to him. He pushed the thought away. Focus on the music. Focus on the audition. This is just noise. On board, the recycled air hummed with forced congeniality. Jordan navigated the narrow aisle, his cello case bumping awkwardly against seat backs. He found row 24, a standard 3-seat configuration. The window seat 24A was his sanctuary, but access was blocked. The man from the queue, Richard Sterling, had already claimed the aisle seat, 24C, and had thrown his briefcase onto the middle seat, 24B, effectively creating a fortress of leather and entitlement. He didn't even look up from his financial newspaper as Jordan paused beside the row. "Excuse me," Jordan said, his voice quiet but clear. "I'm in 24A. Richard Sterling lowered his paper with theatrical slowness. His eyes, small and pale blue, performed the same dismissive scan as before, only now it was laced with irritation. "And that's my seat." "The window," Jordan clarified, gesturing past the briefcase. Sterling let out a long, put-upon sigh. "The middle seat is empty." "Take that one. I need the extra room." He flapped a hand toward the briefcase as if it were a visiting dignitary. He wasn't asking. He was declaring. "But my ticket is for 24A. Jordan insisted, holding up his boarding pass. The simple act of defending his small patch of territory felt like a monumental effort. He could feel the eyes of other passengers shuffling past on them. Sterling folded his paper, the crinkling sound sharp and aggressive. "Look, son," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Some of us paid a premium for this flight. We have work to do. We need our space. You'll be fine in the middle. You can play your little video games and listen to your rap music just as easily from there." The casual racism was so blatant, so lazily delivered, that it took Jordan a moment to process. It wasn't a dog whistle. It was a foghorn. He felt a hot flush of anger and humiliation creep up his neck. "I don't want the middle seat. I want the seat I paid for. Could you please move your bag?" "No," Sterling said flatly. He turned back to his newspaper, a clear dismissal. The finality of the word hung in the air, a wall thrown up between them. The aisle was now backing up. A flight attendant, a kind-faced woman in her 40s named Claire, made her way toward the bottleneck. "Is there a problem here, gentlemen?" she asked, her smile practiced but strained. "No problem," Sterling said without looking up. "The boy here is just confused about his seat." "I'm not confused," Jordan said, his voice shaking slightly with adrenaline. "He's in 24C. I'm in 24A. He's put his bag on the middle seat, and he's refusing to let me get to mine." Claire's smile tightened. She looked at Sterling. "Sir, I need to ask you to please allow the young man to get to his seat. We need to finish boarding so we can depart on time." Sterling finally looked at her, his expression one of utter disbelief, as if she'd just asked him to personally refuel the aircraft. "And I'm telling you, I need the space. The seat is empty. No harm, no foul." "Sir, it's not an empty seat," Claire said, her patience thinning. "It's seat 24B, and this passenger needs to get to 24A. She gestured to Jordan. It was then that Richard Sterling made his move from passive obstruction to active aggression. He stood up, using his bulk to physically block the entrance to the row. He was taller than Jordan and heavier, his face now a mottled red. "I am not going to sit for 8 hours squeezed next to him." He spat the final word, loaded with a contempt that was unmistakable. He didn't look at Jordan, but the insult was aimed like a poisoned dart. "I don't know where he's from or what he's doing on this flight, but my comfort, and frankly my safety, comes first. Find him another seat." The cabin, which had been a low hum of activity, seemed to fall silent. The shuffling stopped. Conversations died. The only sounds were the distant whine of the engines and the sharp, ugly echo of Sterling's words. Jordan stood frozen, his boarding pass still clutched in his hand. It felt like a useless piece of paper, now not a ticket to his future, but an invitation to his own public humiliation. The journey had barely begun, and he was already lost. The silence that followed Richard Sterling's declaration was heavy and suffocating. It was a vacuum that sucked the air out of the cabin, leaving only the raw, ugly prejudice of his statement hanging in the air. Jordan felt as if a spotlight had been switched on, pinning him in the aisle. Every eye was on him. He could feel their pity, their shock, their discomfort. It was worse than anger. It made him feel small, like a problem to be solved, rather than a person who had been wronged. Flight attendant Claire's professional veneer cracked her expression, hardening from strained politeness to controlled fury. "Sir," she said, her voice low and firm, each word precisely enunciated. "What you just said is completely unacceptable. This young man has a ticket for seat 24A. You are in 24C. You will move your briefcase and allow him to take his seat. Right now." Sterling scoffed a dry, dismissive sound. He seemed to relish the attention, puffing out his chest, as if he were a champion of some unspoken cause. Unacceptable. What's unacceptable is your airline's policy of just letting anyone sit anywhere. I'm a Platinum Medallion member. I fly this route twice a month. I expect a certain level of service, a certain caliber of fellow passenger. I am not being unreasonable. I am simply requesting a seating arrangement that I am comfortable with. Your request is based on racial prejudice, and it will not be honored." Claire shot back, her voice rising slightly. She was no longer just an employee. She was a gatekeeper of decency. "This is your final warning. Move your bag, or I will have to involve the captain." "Go ahead." Sterling boomed, his voice echoing in the confined space. "Get the captain." Maybe he'll understand that a paying, loyal customer deserves to have his concerns addressed. He crossed his arms, planting his feet firmly in the aisle, a belligerent statue of privilege. Jordan's mind was racing. Part of him wanted to just say, "Fine, I'll take another seat, just to make it all stop." The humiliation was a physical thing, a burning sensation behind his eyes. He just wanted to disappear, to fold himself up and vanish. But then he thought of his grandfather, a man who had marched in Selma, who had faced down fire hoses and police dogs for the simple right to be treated as a human being. He thought of the years of sacrifice from his parents, the early morning lessons, the endless hours of practice, all to get him to this moment. And he realized he couldn't back down. This wasn't just about a seat anymore. He found his voice surprised at its steadiness. "I'm not moving," he said, looking not at Sterling but directly at Claire. "My seat is 24A. That is where I am going to sit." The standoff was absolute. A few passengers behind them began to grumble, not at Jordan but at the delay. "What's the hold-up?" someone muttered. "Just get the guy out of the way." Sterling heard this, and a smug smile crept onto his face. He believed the tide of public opinion was with him, with the man who just wanted the plane to take off on time. He had fundamentally misjudged his audience. From a few rows back, a woman's voice, sharp and clear, with a faint Eastern European accent, cut through the tension. "What is taking so long?" The man in the suit is refusing to let the boy sit down. It is disgusting. Sterling's head snapped in the direction of the voice. Seated in 21C was a woman in her late 40s, with sharp features, intelligent eyes, and an air of unmistakable authority. She was dressed in a simple blouse and slacks, but she carried herself with the calm confidence of someone used to being in command. "Mind your own business," Sterling snarled at her. "This is my business," the woman replied, her voice dangerously calm. "My business is seeing that this aircraft operates in a safe and orderly manner, and your behavior is a disruption. You are harassing a fellow passenger. Sit down, shut up, and let the flight attendant do her job." A murmur of agreement rippled through the surrounding seats. The spell of shocked silence was breaking, replaced by a growing wave of indignation. Sterling, incensed that a woman would dare to challenge him, took a step toward her. "And who the hell do you think you are?" The woman met his gaze without flinching. "I am Captain Eva Rostova," she said coolly. "And while I may be flying as a passenger today, I am still a pilot with this airline. And I know the regulations. You, sir, are in violation of several of them." The reveal landed with the force of a physical blow. Sterling's face went from red to a pasty white. He was being dressed down by a captain. The passengers who had been tentatively watching were now openly staring, their expressions a mixture of awe and satisfaction. Before Sterling could muster a response, another voice joined the chorus. This one came from the row directly behind Sterling, from a young Latina woman in a sharp blazer, her hair pulled back in a severe bun. "She's right," the woman said, holding up her phone, which was discreetly recording. "I'm a lawyer, and your actions constitute harassment and intimidation. You're creating a hostile environment. Not only is the airline within its rights to remove you, but you could also be facing civil penalties." She introduced herself to no one in particular, but for everyone to hear. Maria Flores, civil rights attorney. The dam had broken. A retired school teacher in row 25, a kindly-looking grandmother named Beatrice Vance, stood up, her voice trembling but resolute. "I have been teaching children for 40 years, she said, her voice carrying an unexpected authority. "I taught them that the color of your skin doesn't matter. It's the content of your character. And you, sir," she said, pointing a frail but steady finger at Sterling, "have shown us you have no character at all. Let the boy sit down. Sit down." A smattering of applause broke out. Sterling was surrounded. His fortress of entitlement was crumbling. He looked from the pilot to the lawyer to the school teacher, his face a mask of bewildered fury. He had expected to be the hero of his own petty drama, the put-upon businessman standing up for his rights. Instead, he had become the villain. The entire cabin, a jury of his peers, had found him guilty. He looked at Jordan. His eyes filled with a new, more potent venom. The humiliation he was now feeling he laid entirely at the feet of the 16-year-old boy who had simply wanted to sit in his assigned seat. He opened his mouth perhaps to let loose another tirade, to double down on his bigotry. But he never got the chance. Claire, the flight attendant, had been speaking quietly into the intercom phone. She hung it up and turned to Sterling, her expression now devoid of any emotion except a cold, professional finality. "The captain has been informed, sir," she said. "He agrees with Captain Rostova. Your behavior is a security threat. Please collect your belongings. You are being removed from this flight." The flight attendant's announcement was a thunderclap in the pressurized cabin. Richard Sterling stood frozen, his face a grotesque canvas of shock and indignation. The words "removed from this flight" seemed to short-circuit his brain. It was a concept so alien to his experience, so contrary to his perception of the world and his place in it, that he couldn't immediately process it. "You can't be serious," he stammered, his voice losing its bombast, replaced by a note of high-pitched disbelief. "Remove me. I'm the victim here. I'm the one whose comfort is being compromised." "Your comfort is not the issue," Claire replied, her voice as unyielding as polished steel. "Your behavior is, you have harassed another passenger and created a disturbance. Please step into the aisle." But the cabin was no longer just a collection of passive observers. The intervention of Captain Rostova and Maria Flores had been a spark in a tinderbox of shared decency. The passengers were no longer just waiting for the situation to be resolved by the crew. They felt invested. They were part of it now. From across the aisle, a man in a sleek, dark grey t-shirt, who had been watching the entire exchange with a look of intense disgust, spoke up. He had the sharp, focused energy of a Silicon Valley executive. "He's not the victim," the man said, his voice calm, but carrying immense weight. "He's a racist, and we're not flying anywhere with him." He nodded toward Jordan. "I'll give the kid my first-class seat if it gets this piece of trash off the plane faster." He looked directly at Sterling. "People like you are a bug in the system. Obsolete. Time to be deleted." Sterling's head whipped around. "Who do you think you're talking to?" The man gave a humorless smile. "Ben Carter, CEO of Nexus Innovations, and I'm talking to a man who is about to have a very, very bad day." The mention of the high-profile tech company sent another ripple through the cabin. Richard Sterling's world was one of hierarchies and power dynamics, and he was suddenly finding himself on the lowest rung. A pilot, a lawyer, a CEO. This wasn't the great unwashed he had so arrogantly dismissed. It was a coalition of professionals who found his behavior repugnant. Beatrice Vance, the retired teacher, wasn't finished. "We see you," she said, her voice ringing with the moral clarity of a lifelong educator. "We all see exactly who you are." It was a chorus of condemnation. A young man in a college sweatshirt a few rows back shouted, "Yeah, get him off." A British couple returning from their holiday shook their heads in dismay, the husband muttering utterly shameful. The passengers were no longer a crowd. They were a community forged in a spontaneous, shared rejection of hate. Sterling, realizing his appeals to status were failing, tried another tactic, feigned remorse. He turned to Claire, his expression shifting to one of a man deeply misunderstood. "Look, perhaps I was a bit stressed," he began, his voice oozing insincerity. "It's been a long day of meetings. I misspoke. I'm happy to just sit down and we can all forget about this." He even attempted a placating smile in Jordan's direction. "No hard feelings, right, son?" The condescension was so thick it was almost laughable. Jordan just stared at him, his expression unreadable. He didn't have to say a thing. The rest of the cabin said it for him. "Oh, no, you don't," Maria Flores exclaimed, her lawyerly instincts kicking in. "You don't get to spew racist venom and then just take it back when you're facing consequences. That's not how this works. We are not forgetting this." She held up her phone again. "And I have the whole thing on video." The word video was the final nail in Sterling's coffin. His face paled. He understood the modern world. He knew what a video like that could do. His career, his reputation, his carefully constructed world of privilege, it was all suddenly balanced on a razor's edge. Two large gate agents, a man and a woman, appeared at the front of the cabin, their faces stern and businesslike. They were clearly there to provide an escort. The reality of the situation finally crashed down on Sterling, with its full, humiliating weight. He was being kicked off a plane in front of 200 people. He grabbed his briefcase from the seat, his movements jerky and clumsy. He shot a look of pure hatred at Jordan, a silent promise of retribution that Jordan met with a quiet, unblinking stare. As Sterling started his walk of shame up the aisle, a low hiss of boos and jeers followed him. "Goodbye," someone called out. "Don't let the jet bridge hit you on the way out," another quipped. Ben Carter caught his eye as he passed. Nexus Innovations will be divesting from any and all funds associated with your company, by the way he said conversationally, as if discussing the weather. Have a nice life. Sterling stumbled, his face ashen. He didn't look at anyone. His gaze fixed on the exit, the only escape from the suffocating judgment of the cabin. As he disappeared into the jet bridge, a spontaneous, unified cheer erupted throughout the plane. It wasn't a cheer of malice, but of relief and affirmation. It was the sound of a community cleansing itself of decency, winning a small but significant victory. In the sudden quiet that followed, everyone looked toward row 24. Jordan stood there, still holding his boarding pass, looking slightly overwhelmed. Claire, the flight attendant, came over her face, softening into a warm, genuine smile. "Well," she said gently, "I believe seat 24A is waiting for you." Captain Eva Rostova gave him a reassuring nod from her seat. Maria Flores offered a thumbs up. Beatrice Vance beamed at him with grandmotherly pride. Jordan finally allowed himself a small smile. He slid past the now blessedly empty seats of 24B and 24C and sank into his window seat. He looked out at the tarmac, at the organized chaos of the airport, and felt a profound sense of gratitude that washed away the sting of the earlier humiliation. He hadn't been alone after all. While the drama unfolded in the main cabin, Captain Michael Corrigan was in the cockpit of the Boeing 777, running through the final pre-flight checks with his first officer. Their world was a cocoon of glowing instruments and methodical procedures, a stark contrast to the emotional turbulence brewing just a few dozen feet behind them. The first inkling of trouble came not as a shout, but as a calm, professional buzz on the intercom. "Mike, it's Claire," came the lead flight attendant's voice. It was her tone that got his attention. It was perfectly level, but stripped of the usual pre-departure cadence. It was the voice she used when things were not routine. "Go ahead," Claire Corrigan replied, leaning toward the receiver. "We have a passenger dispute in row 24. A male passenger is refusing to allow another passenger to take his assigned seat. And he's being verbally abusive, of a racial nature." Corrigan's hand froze over a switch. He and his first officer exchanged a look. Of all the things that could delay a flight, mechanical issues, weather, air traffic control, a passenger-initiated conflict was the most unpredictable and potentially the most dangerous. "Is the situation contained?" Corrigan asked, his primary concern being safety and order. "For now," Claire replied. "But he's causing a significant disturbance and refusing to follow crew instructions. Captain Rostova is also back here. She's a passenger on this flight, and she's corroborating the severity of the situation. I think you need to be involved." The mention of another captain intervening sealed it. This wasn't a simple argument over an armrest. Corrigan unbuckled his harness. "I'm on my way back. Keep the main door open." As he emerged from the cockpit, the atmosphere in the cabin was immediately palpable. The applause following Sterling's removal had died down, but a charged energy remained. Corrigan was an imposing figure, tall and grey-haired with a calm, no-nonsense demeanor that had been honed over 30 years of flying. His uniform, with its 4 gold stripes, was a symbol of ultimate authority on the aircraft, and his presence commanded immediate respect. He walked down the aisle, his eyes scanning the faces of the passengers taking in the scene. He saw Jordan now seated by the window, looking shaken but composed. He saw Eva Rostova, who gave him a subtle affirmative nod. He saw Maria Flores, who still had her phone in her hand. And he saw Claire, who was waiting for him by the row. "Give me the summary," Corrigan said, his voice low and authoritative. Claire quickly and efficiently recounted the events, Sterling's initial refusal, his blocking of the aisle, his escalating belligerence, and finally his explicitly racist statement. He said, and I quote, "I am not going to sit for 8 hours squeezed next to him." Claire reported her professional disgust evident. He was loud, disruptive, and completely ignored my direct instructions to de-escalate. Corrigan's expression was grim. He looked at Eva Rostova. "Eva, your take, Mike, it was worse than she's letting on," Rostova said, frankly. The man was a bully. The kid here, she gestured to Jordan, handled it with more grace than most adults would have. Sterling's behavior was aggressive and created a genuine sense of hostility. In my opinion, he was a clear risk to the safety and order of this flight. Corrigan then turned to Maria Flores. "And you are Maria Flores. I'm an attorney." I recorded the latter part of the incident. The passengers' comments were discriminatory and created an intimidating environment in clear violation of your airline's carriage contract. Corrigan nodded slowly, processing the information from 3 separate reliable sources: his lead flight attendant, a fellow captain, and a lawyer. He then looked at Jordan. "Son, are you all right?" Jordan looked up at the captain, the man who held the final say. "I'm okay now. Thank you." His voice was quiet, but it held no trace of fear. Corrigan's decision was already 99% made, but due diligence required him to hear the other side. He walked to the front of the plane, where the 2 gate agents were standing, with a flustered and irate Richard Sterling in the jet bridge. Captain Corrigan Sterling said, trying to muster an air of aggrieved authority. "Thank goodness, there has been a terrible misunderstanding. Your crew has completely overreacted." Corrigan crossed his arms, his face an unreadable mask. "Mr. Sterling, I have 3 credible reports, including one from another of this airline's captains, that you verbally harassed a minor, used racially charged language, refused to follow crew instructions, and caused a major disturbance during boarding. Is there anything in that summary you believe is inaccurate?" Sterling's face fell. He opened and closed his mouth, searching for a defense. I simply expressed a preference. It was a stressful day. The boy was being difficult. The boy was trying to get to the seat he paid for. Corrigan countered, his voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level. "The seat you were actively blocking. This airline has a zero-tolerance policy for harassment and discrimination. It's not a guideline. It's a rule. It's printed on every ticket jacket and every confirmation email. You violated that policy in the most egregious way possible. So you're just going to throw a platinum medallion customer off a flight?" Sterling demanded, playing his last pathetic card. "I spend over $100,000 a year with this airline." Corrigan was unmoved. "Mr. Sterling, you could own this airline. It wouldn't make a difference. No one on my aircraft will be subjected to the kind of abuse you displayed. Your status gives you access to a better lounge, not a license to be a bigot." He turned to the lead gate agent. "He's denied boarding. Make sure he is escorted from the gate area. And please rebook him on the next available flight on another airline. He is no longer welcome on ours." He then looked Sterling directly in the eye. "Your platinum status is revoked, effective immediately. You'll be receiving a formal notice of your lifetime ban within 24 hours. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have 247 other passengers I need to get to London." Without another word, Captain Corrigan turned his back on the sputtering, defeated man and walked back onto the plane. He paused at the front of the cabin and picked up the intercom receiver. "Folks, this is your captain speaking." His voice filled the cabin, calm and reassuring. "I'd like to apologize for the delay. We had to resolve a customer service issue. I want to thank you all for your patience and also for your conduct. It's reassuring to know we have a cabin full of people who will stand up for what's right." He paused. "Flight attendants, please prepare the cabin for departure." A second more heartfelt round of applause filled the plane. It was for Claire, for Eva, for Maria, for Beatrice, and for Ben. But most of all, it was for Captain Corrigan, who had made the final decisive call affirming that on his plane, humanity and decency would always have authority over prejudice and privilege. As the Boeing 777 finally pushed back from the gate and began its powerful ascent into the darkening Georgia sky, a palpable sense of calm and camaraderie settled over the cabin. The ugly tension had dissipated, replaced by the quiet hum of the engines and a shared feeling of a trial overcome. For Jordan, the world outside his window was a glittering tapestry of lights. But the world inside the plane had become something far more remarkable. He was no longer just an anonymous passenger in 24A. He was the young man the cabin had rallied around. People would catch his eye as they walked down the aisle and give him a small, supportive smile. The tension in his shoulders, which he hadn't even realized was there, began to melt away. A little while after the seatbelt sign was turned off, a procession of visitors began to arrive at his row. First was Beatrice Vance, the retired teacher. She leaned over the empty aisle seat, her face wreathed in a kind smile. "I just wanted to make sure you were truly all right, dear," she said, her voice soft. "That man was a monster. You handled yourself with such dignity." "Thank you, ma'am," Jordan said, genuinely touched. "Thank you for speaking up." "Nonsense," she waved a hand dismissively. "Evil thrives when good people do nothing. I wasn't about to do nothing." She patted his arm gently before returning to her seat. Next came Maria Flores, the lawyer. She was all business, but with a warm undercurrent. "Hey, just wanted to give you my card," she said, handing him a crisp white rectangle. "That video I took, I've got it backed up. If that man or his company tries to cause you any trouble, or if you just want to talk about what legal options you might have, you call me. No charge. Pro bono." Jordan looked at the card. Maria Flores, Esq. Civil Rights and Social Justice Law. Wow. Thank you. I don't think it will come to that, but thank you. "Never hurts to be prepared," she said with a wink. "Good luck in London." The most surprising visit came from Ben Carter, the tech CEO. He had, true to his word, arranged with the flight attendants to swap his spacious first-class seat for one in economy, plus just to be closer. He now sat a few rows ahead. He came back and leaned against the seat. "That was quite a thing," Ben said, his gaze analytical, but not unkind. "You held your own." He gestured toward Jordan's cello case, stowed safely in a nearby cabin closet by Claire. "What do you play?" "Cello," Jordan said a bit shyly. "Figured. Big case." Ben smiled, headed to London for music, an audition, for the Royal Academy. Ben's eyebrows shot up in genuine admiration. "That's major league. Seriously impressive." He grew more serious. "Listen, Jordan, the world is full of guys like Richard Sterling. They're gatekeepers. They think because they have a little bit of power, a little bit of money, they get to decide who belongs and who doesn't. Don't ever let them get in your head. Their opinion is the least valuable currency on earth. What you have," he nodded toward the cello closet, "that's real currency. Talent, dedication. That's what matters." It was a speech Jordan hadn't expected from a CEO in a designer t-shirt, and it resonated deeply. "Thanks, Mr. Carter." "Ben." "And you're welcome." Finally, as the dinner service was concluding, Captain Eva Rostova came by. She pulled up a spare pillow and sat on the edge of the empty aisle seat, speaking to Jordan in a low, conspiratorial tone. "You know, the hardest part of flying isn't dealing with turbulence or bad weather," she said, her accent lending a certain gravity to her words. "It's managing people. Today you saw the worst and the best of them." "I really did," Jordan agreed. "That man, he feeds on intimidation. He expects people to shrink, to back down." "You didn't," she said, her eyes studying him. "You held your ground. That takes a different kind of courage. It's the same courage it takes to walk onto a stage in front of 1,000 people and play your heart out. Don't ever lose that." They talked for nearly an hour. Jordan told her about his love for Jacqueline Dupre's recording of the Elgar cello concerto, and she told him about her first solo flight over the Czech countryside. He learned that she was flying to London to see her daughter, who was a student at the London School of Economics. She was a mother, a pilot, a formidable woman who had shattered glass ceilings in a male-dominated industry, and she was talking to him, a 16-year-old from Atlanta, as an equal. As the cabin lights dimmed and the plane settled into its long, dark journey across the Atlantic, Jordan leaned his head against the cool plastic of the window. He felt a profound shift inside him. The incident with Richard Sterling had been ugly and humiliating, but the response to it had been beautiful and empowering. He had boarded the plane feeling alone, a solitary traveler on a high-stakes mission. But he wasn't alone. He was surrounded by a pilot, a lawyer, a teacher, a CEO, a temporary family of strangers who had for a few crucial moments decided his dignity was their shared responsibility. He put on his headphones, but instead of Bach, he just listened to the steady roar of the engines, carrying him toward his future. He felt buoyed not just by the miracle of flight, but by the unexpected grace of his fellow passengers. The audition still loomed, but it felt less daunting now. He wasn't just playing for himself anymore. He was playing for all of them. Long before flight BA226 touched down at Heathrow, the story of Richard Sterling had already landed with the force of a sonic boom on the internet. Maria Flores. The civil rights attorney was a savvy user of social media. After ensuring Jordan was okay, and the plane was safely on its way, she had connected to the aircraft's Wi-Fi. She debated for a moment, weighing the ethics of posting the video. But then she thought of Sterling's smug, unrepentant face and the quiet dignity of the young man he had targeted. This wasn't just about one man's bad behavior. It was a textbook case of casual corporate racism that so often went unchallenged. She edited the video to blur the faces of the other passengers, but left Sterling's and Jordan's clearly visible. She added a concise, factual caption. On board British Airways flight BA226 from ATL to LHR today. This man, Richard Sterling, refused to allow this young musician to take his assigned seat, making explicitly racist statements. Watch as the entire cabin, including an off-duty pilot, turns on him before he is rightfully removed from the flight. This is what standing up to bigotry looks like. Flying. While black racism on a plane allies. She posted it to Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, then put her phone away. When she checked it again an hour later, it had exploded. The video was a perfect storm of viral content. It had a clear villain, a sympathetic hero, and a deeply satisfying resolution. By the time the plane was over the coast of Ireland, it had been viewed over 5 million times on Twitter alone. News outlets from online blogs to major international networks had picked it up. Richard Sterling and Plain Racist were trending worldwide. Internet sleuths, with their terrifying efficiency, had identified him within minutes. He was Richard Sterling, a senior partner at Sterling & Vance Consulting, a mid-tier but highly aggressive management consulting firm in Atlanta. The irony of the firm's name sharing a surname with Beatrice Vance, the heroic school teacher, was not lost on the commenters. His company's website was flooded with traffic, and its review pages on sites like Glassdoor were inundated with one-star ratings and scathing comments referencing the video. His LinkedIn profile was discovered, and the comments section of his self-congratulatory posts about leadership and integrity became a digital pillory. The backlash was swift and merciless. Sterling & Vance Consulting's main clients included several Fortune 500 companies with strong public commitments to diversity and inclusion. By dawn in Atlanta, their corporate communications departments were in crisis mode. The pressure was immense. Aboard the flight, Ben Carter, the CEO of Nexus Innovations, was doing his own digging. He had recognized Sterling's face but couldn't place it. Now, with the name confirmed online, it clicked. Sterling & Vance was a competitor, a firm that was notorious in their industry for over-promising, under-delivering, and using cutthroat tactics to poach clients. They had recently bid on a major contract that Nexus was also vying for. Ben pulled out his laptop. He had heard rumors for years about Sterling's unethical business practices, insider trading, falsifying data to impress clients, and creating a toxic, high-pressure work environment. The video of his public racism was simply the external manifestation of a character that was rotten to the core. Ben made a few quiet, encrypted calls to contacts in the industry, including a journalist he trusted at the Wall Street Journal. He didn't just want Sterling to face social consequences. He wanted him to face professional ones. He had a strong suspicion that the man's entire career was a house of cards, and the viral video was the gust of wind that could bring it all down. "He's not just a racist," Ben muttered to himself as he typed. "He's a fraud, and frauds always leave a trail." Meanwhile, the official response was also taking shape. British Airways, tagged thousands of times, issued a statement praising the actions of their crew and Captain Corrigan. They reiterated their zero-tolerance policy and confirmed that Richard Sterling had been issued a lifetime ban. It was a masterclass in corporate crisis management, turning a potentially negative incident into a public affirmation of their values. Unaware of the firestorm he had ignited, Richard Sterling was likely at another gate in Atlanta, trying to bully his way onto a different flight, still believing he was the wronged party. He had no idea that his world was being systematically dismantled online. He had tried to deny a 16-year-old boy a few square feet of personal space, and in doing so had lost everything. The court of public opinion had convened at the speed of light, and the verdict was unanimous. He was guilty, and the sentence was being carried out in real time for the entire world to see. His karma wasn't just coming. It had already arrived, checked in, and was busy dismantling his life before his plane had even left the ground. When Jordan Washington stepped out of the arrivals hall at Heathrow Airport, blinking in the soft grey London morning, his phone buzzed to life, reconnecting to the world. It immediately began to vibrate uncontrollably, a frantic deluge of notifications. Texts from his parents, missed calls, and hundreds of alerts from social media. His face was everywhere. The video Maria Flores had posted was the top story on BBC News, CNN, and countless other outlets. He saw screenshots of his own calm, dignified expression juxtaposed with Richard Sterling's contorted, furious sneer. He was no longer just Jordan Washington cello prodigy. He was the teen who stood up to plain racist. His parents had of course seen the video and were beside themselves with a mixture of horror at what he'd endured and immense pride at how he had handled it. He called them immediately, reassuring them that he was safe, and thanks to the other passengers, feeling surprisingly positive. As he was ending the call, he received a message from a number he didn't recognize. "Jordan, it's Ben Carter. Hope you landed safe. Check your email. I've taken care of your accommodations. The hotel you booked is fine, but the one I've arranged is better. It's right next to the academy. Room service is on me. Go relax and focus on your audition. You've earned it." Jordan checked his email. Ben had booked him a suite at the 5-star Marylebone Hotel and had arranged for a private car service to be waiting for him. He was floored by the generosity. The fallout for Richard Sterling, however, was catastrophic. When he finally landed in London on a different airline, nearly a day later, his life was in ruins. His partners at Sterling and Vance, facing a mass exodus of clients and a full-blown PR nightmare, had held an emergency board meeting. He was fired via a brutal public statement that condemned his abhorrent behavior, which was in complete opposition to the values our firm represents. The Vance in the company name, a partner who had retired years earlier, even issued his own statement, expressing his profound disappointment and shame. But the worst was yet to come. The journalistic investigation kick-started by Ben Carter's tip had borne fruit. The Wall Street Journal published a bombshell exposé detailing a long history of fraudulent practices at Sterling and Vance, all masterminded by Richard Sterling. They had evidence of him faking performance metrics and using illegally obtained information to undercut competitors. The article cited multiple anonymous sources from within the company, who felt emboldened to speak out after seeing the viral video. His public display of racism had shattered the illusion of his professional integrity, revealing the rot underneath. Within 48 hours, the SEC announced a formal investigation into his activities. He had lost his job, his reputation, and was now facing the prospect of financial ruin and potential prison time. 2 days later, Jordan stood on the hallowed stage of the Duke's Hall at the Royal Academy of Music. The room was intimidating, ornate, and steeped in history. He felt the familiar flutter of nerves, but it was different this time. He thought of Captain Rostova's words about courage. He thought of Ben Carter's belief in his talent, of Maria's fierce defense, and Beatrice's simple, powerful faith in what was right. He took a deep breath, and drew his bow across the strings of his cello. He played the prelude to Bach's Cello Suite No. 3. The notes filled the hall, not with just technical perfection, but with emotion, with a story. There was sorrow and struggle in the music, but also resilience, hope, and a soaring, defiant beauty. He poured the entire experience, the humiliation, the fear, the anger, and the overwhelming gratitude into his performance. He wasn't just playing the music. He was testifying. When the final note faded into silence, the 3 adjudicators on the panel looked at him, their expressions filled with a profound respect that went beyond his technical skill. A week later, back in Atlanta, an email arrived. It was from the Royal Academy. His hands trembled as he opened it. "Dear Mr. Washington, following your outstanding audition, we are delighted to offer you a place. Furthermore, the board has been so moved by your talent and your remarkable composure under recently publicized circumstances that we are pleased to offer you the Aberconway Scholarship, covering full tuition and living expenses." He had done it. The story of Flight BA226 became a touchstone, a viral moment that didn't just fade away. The passengers who had come together for him, formed an unlikely group connected by a WhatsApp chat Maria had started called the BA226 crew. They checked in on Jordan, celebrated his scholarship, and shared news. Eva Rostova offered to connect him with her daughter in London. Beatrice Vance sent him a handwritten card with a $100 bill tucked inside for snacks. Ben Carter became a long-distance mentor, offering advice not just on music, but on navigating a world that would continue to challenge him. Richard Sterling's karma had landed with brutal, undeniable force. He became a cautionary tale, a meme, a symbol of a dying breed of entitlement. His downfall was absolute, a direct consequence of a choice he made in a moment of casual cruelty. He had tried to make a young boy feel small and powerless, but in doing so he had only revealed his own insignificance. Jordan, on the other hand, had found his power. His journey to London had started with an act of hate, but it had concluded with a symphony of support. He had learned that for every person who wants to close a door in your face, there is a cabin full of people willing to stand up and hold it wide open for you. He had his seat by the window after all, and the view of his future had never been clearer. The story of Flight BA226 isn't just about one racist passenger. It's a powerful testament to the fact that we are not just bystanders in the lives of others. In that pressurized cabin, a group of strangers made a choice. They chose to speak up, to intervene, and to transform a moment of ugly prejudice into an unforgettable act of collective decency. They reminded us that the world is changed not by grand gestures, but by the simple, courageous decision to not look away. If this story moved you and you believe in the power of community and standing up for what's right, please give this video a thumbs up and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories that inspire and prove that a little bit of humanity can make all the difference.